There exist spaces in our world that transcend any geographic coordinates. They don't appear marked on any map, nor will you discover them by looking out the window or walking the streets. These territories inhabit exclusively in our minds, in the way we organize our existence, in the invisible structures we build around ourselves. Yet they prove more authentic, more powerful, and more dangerous than any physical place. Most of us transit our entire lives through these spaces without even realizing we're trapped. We feel exhausted, anxious, empty, and end up blaming ourselves. We believe something is wrong inside us. But what if the problem wasn't you at all? What if you were simply inhabiting the wrong psychological neighborhood? I want to tell you about 7 places that destroy your true essence, not through violence or coercion, but through something much more subtle. They destroy you by making you forget who you are, teaching you to abandon your own nature, convincing you that the mask is more valuable than the face beneath it. The first dangerous place is what I call the Hall of Mirrors. Here, all the people around you reflect only what you already believe. Every conversation confirms your thoughts. Every opinion coincides with yours. Every fear you harbor is validated and amplified by a chorus of voices that sound remarkably similar to your own. You might think this sounds quite comfortable, even pleasant, and that's precisely why it's so dangerous. The human mind isn't designed to live in perfect harmony with itself. It needs to be challenged, tested, expanded. When you surround yourself only with people who think exactly like you, something quite curious happens. Your mind doesn't strengthen. It becomes more rigid, more fragile, more fearful. I knew a man who spent all his time with people who shared exactly his same perspectives on everything, politics, religion, the right way to live. He thought he was being wise, staying among his own. But what he didn't understand was that his capacity for thought was shrinking every day. His world was becoming a little smaller, a little more frightening, a little more dependent on the group to tell him what was real. The problem with the Hall of Mirrors is that it makes you terrified of different ideas. A new thought feels like an attack. A different perspective is perceived as betrayal. You identify so much with your beliefs that questioning them feels like dying. And then you cling even tighter to the mirrors, demanding they show you only what you want to see. But this is what you must understand. When you live in a hall of mirrors, you're not really thinking at all. You're simply repeating. You're not growing, you're calcifying. You're not becoming more yourself. You're becoming less. The exit is simple, but not easy. You must deliberately seek out voices that disturb you. Not to argue with them, not to prove they're wrong, but simply to feel how your mind expands, to remember what it feels like not to know, to wonder, to question even your most cherished certainties. The second dangerous place is the arena of comparison. Here is where you measure your worth against the achievements, status, possessions, and success of everyone else. In this place, nothing you do will ever be enough because there will always be someone, somewhere, who has done it better, faster, or more impressively. The arena of comparison is peculiar because it disguises itself as motivation. We tell ourselves that comparing ourselves to others will inspire us to improve, but watch what really happens. When you live in this arena, you don't inspire yourself, you exhaust yourself. Every achievement feels empty because it's not good enough compared to someone else's. Every success is immediately followed by the question, but what about them? I remember a woman who got a promotion at work, something she had been fighting for years. But instead of feeling joy, all she could think about was her colleague who had been promoted to an even higher position. Her achievement meant nothing because someone else had achieved more. Do you see the trap? She had handed over her power to feel satisfied with her own life. The arena of comparison is founded on a basic confusion. It treats life as if it were a race with a single goal, as if there existed some objective measure by which all human lives could be ranked. But this is absurd. Your life is not comparable to anyone else's. You're not competing with the rest of humanity. You're on your own path. Play your own game. When you inhabit the arena of comparison, you stop pursuing what truly brings you joy and begin pursuing what brings you recognition. You stop listening to your own desires and start performing for an imaginary audience. You become so busy keeping score that you forget to actually live. Escaping this place requires something radical. You must stop measuring altogether, not occasionally, but completely. You must learn to do things simply because they delight you, not because they'll impress someone. You must recover the childlike capacity to play without keeping score, to create without needing applause, to exist without constantly calculating your position. The third dangerous place is the theater of masks. Here, authenticity is punished and performance is rewarded. You learn to show only the parts of yourself that are acceptable, impressive, or useful. Everything else must be hidden behind a carefully constructed facade. We all wear masks to some extent. This is natural, even necessary. You don't reveal your soul to the supermarket cashier or share your deepest fears at a business meeting. But the theater of masks is different. In this place, the mask becomes so thick, so permanent, that you forget there was ever a face beneath it. I knew a man who worked in a place where showing any weakness was professional death. He learned to laugh at jokes that weren't funny, to agree with ideas he rejected, to hide every part of himself that didn't fit the approved image. And after years of this performance, something terrifying happened. He no longer knew who he really was. The mask had become the only identity he could recognize. This is what the theater of masks does. It doesn't just hide your true self. It erases it slowly, imperceptibly, until one day you search inside yourself and find nothing. You've become a hollow performance, a walking disguise with no one inside. The most insidious part is how exhausting it becomes. Every interaction requires careful calculation. What can I say? What must I hide? How should I appear? You come home after a day in the theater and you're exhausted, not from genuine engagement, but from the constant effort of being someone you're not. And here's the cruel joke. The very things you're trying to achieve through this performance, connection, belonging, acceptance, can only be found through authenticity. The performance creates exactly the isolation it attempts to avoid. You end up surrounded by people who don't really know you, in relationships that feel strangely empty, receiving approval that means nothing because it's not really for you. The exit from the theater requires courage. You must begin to remove the mask, carefully at first, testing to see who stays and who goes. And yes, some people will leave, those who preferred your performance to your reality. But this is not loss. It's liberation, because the people who remain and the new ones who arrive will be in relationship with you, not with your disguise. The fourth dangerous place is the room of silence. Not the good kind of silence, the contemplative stillness where wisdom grows. No, this is toxic silence where pain is buried, needs are denied, and truth is too dangerous to speak. Many of us grew up in families that operated this way. Everything looked fine on the surface. No shouting, no obvious dysfunction, but beneath the pleasant facade, everyone was slowly suffocating. Feelings weren't expressed. Problems weren't addressed. Needs were swallowed and hidden. The tacit rule was simple: don't disturb the balance. In the room of silence, you learn that having emotional needs is selfish, that expressing pain is weakness, that the way to maintain peace is to never be honest about what hurts. And so you become very skilled at suffering in silence, at pretending everything is fine, at convincing yourself that numbness is the same as peace. But this is what really happens in this place. Your emotional needs don't disappear when you ignore them. They accumulate in your body, in your nervous system, creating anxiety you can't explain and depression that seems to come from nowhere. You feel alone even when you're surrounded by family because no one is really seeing you. Everyone is performing this elaborate dance of not noticing each other's pain. I knew a family that prided itself on never fighting. They thought this meant they were close. But when I spoke with them individually, each person felt desperately alone. The mother was depressed, but couldn't say so. The father was overwhelmed, but had no one to tell. The children learned that their feelings were inconveniences, interruptions to the carefully maintained image of family perfection. The room of silence teaches you to cope with pain instead of healing from it. It trains you to ask, how can I better tolerate this suffering? Instead of, How can I address what's really wrong? And so you develop all kinds of ingenious strategies for managing discomfort without actually resolving anything. The exit requires breaking the silence gently but firmly. It means saying aloud the things that have been hidden, not with anger or blame, but with simple honesty. I'm suffering. I need help. This isn't working for me. It means risking false peace for the possibility of real connection. And yes, the family system will resist. Silence is comfortable for those who fear honesty, but your liberation is worth the discomfort. The fifth dangerous place is the storm of noise. This is the opposite of toxic silence. Here you're constantly bombarded with information, stimuli, demands, distractions. There's always something to read, something to discuss, something requiring your attention. You fill every moment of stillness with activity because calm feels unbearable. You might think this sounds like modern life, and you'd be partly right. But this place has existed long before our current era. It's any place where you use external noise to avoid internal truth. Reading the newspaper obsessively to avoid thinking about your marriage. Keeping yourself endlessly busy with social commitments to escape your own company. Filling your mind with other people's problems so you don't have to face your own. The storm of noise is seductive because it feels productive. You're keeping yourself informed, busy, engaged. But watch what happens to your mind in this place. You consume enormous amounts of information, but retain almost nothing. You have opinions about everything, but deep understanding of nothing. You're exhausted from constant mental activity, but can't point to anything you've really accomplished. I once knew a man who read 3 newspapers every morning and spent his evenings in endless discussions about current events. He prided himself on being well informed, but when I asked him what he really understood, what wisdom he'd gained from all this consumption, he had nothing to say. He'd been filling his mind with noise to avoid the silence where real thinking occurs. The storm of noise keeps you in a state of constant reaction. You're always responding to the latest thing, the most recent crisis, the newest outrage. There's no time for contemplation, for integration, for allowing experiences to settle into understanding. And without that settling, nothing you learn really becomes part of you. It simply passes through, leaving you feeling full, but somehow still empty. The exit is terrifying because it requires turning off the noise and sitting with whatever arises. At first, anxiety will flood in. All the things you've been avoiding will surface. This is why you kept the noise going in the first place. But if you can stay with the discomfort, something extraordinary happens. Your mind begins to clear. Your thoughts become your own again. You start to hear that quiet inner voice that the storm was drowning out. This is the place where you systematically abandon your own truth, your own needs, your own instincts. It happens so gradually you don't even notice it. You say yes when everything inside you screams no. You remain in situations that drain you because leaving seems too difficult. You choose what's expected over what's authentic, what's safe over what's true. In the chamber of self-betrayal, you become skilled at ignoring yourself. Someone asks what you want and you genuinely don't know because you spent so much time considering only what others want. What seems practical? What will avoid conflict? Your gut instincts, which were once clear and strong, become weak whispers you've learned to dismiss. I knew a woman who spent 20 years in a career she didn't care about, married to a man she didn't love, living in a city that depressed her. When I asked her why, she said it was what made sense. Her family approved, the job was secure, the marriage was stable. She had built her entire life on what seemed reasonable to everyone else while completely ignoring what felt right for her. This is what the chamber of self-betrayal does. It convinces you that maturity means ignoring your desires, that responsibility means betraying your truth, that being a good person means abandoning yourself. And so you make 1,000 small compromises, each barely perceptible, until you wake up one day and realize you're living someone else's life completely. The cruelest part is that society often rewards self-betrayal. They call you mature when you ignore your needs, responsible when you sacrifice your happiness, selfless when you put everyone else first. But this isn't virtue. This is slow spiritual death. You can't authentically love others while betraying yourself. You can't give from an empty well. The exit requires something that may feel selfish at first. You must begin checking in with yourself again. What do I really want? How does this feel in my body? What is my truth, regardless of what others expect? And then, most terrifying of all, you must begin making decisions based on these answers. Some people will be disappointed. This is inevitable, but your life belongs to you, not to their expectations. The seventh and most dangerous place is the basement of shadows. This is the internal space where you've locked away all the parts of yourself you're too afraid or ashamed to face. Every painful memory, every shameful thought, every quality you've decided is unacceptable. Into the basement they go. Now you might think this sounds like a good strategy. Push down the bad things and focus on being good. But this is what really happens. What you bury doesn't stay buried. It becomes stronger in the darkness, influencing your behavior in ways you don't understand. You find yourself overreacting to small things, sabotaging your own success, repeating patterns you swore you'd never repeat, and you can't understand why, because the real cause is locked in the basement. I knew a man who despised his father's anger and swore that he'd never be like that. He prided himself on being calm and controlled, but then he had children, and to his horror, he found himself raging at them over tiny things. He had locked his own anger in the basement thinking he'd gotten rid of it, but it had simply been waiting in the darkness, gathering strength until it burst out in exactly the way he feared. This is what the basement of shadows does. Every quality you reject in yourself doesn't disappear. It goes underground and begins directing your life from the unconscious. You harshly judge others for traits you secretly fear in yourself. You attract situations that force you to confront what you've been avoiding. You become literally possessed by the parts of yourself you refuse to acknowledge. But here's what's extraordinary. The basement of shadows doesn't only contain what you fear. It also harbors tremendous power, creativity, and vitality. That anger you buried could become passionate advocacy once you face it. That sadness could become deep empathy. That shame could become fierce compassion for others struggling with similar issues. The exit from the basement requires descent, not avoidance, not denial, but the courage to go down into the darkness with light and see what's really there. Not to judge it, not to fight it, but simply to acknowledge it. Yes, this too is part of me. And in that recognition, the shadow loses its power to control you unconsciously. You become whole again, integrated, no longer at war with yourself. So here we are, 7 places that destroy your true self. The hall of mirrors that makes you rigid and fearful. The arena of comparison that makes your achievements insignificant. The theater of masks that erases your authentic face. The room of silence that buries your truth. The storm of noise that drowns your inner voice. The chamber of self-betrayal where you gradually abandon yourself. And the basement of shadows where you hide from your wholeness. But recognizing these places is only the beginning. The question now is, how do you leave? How do you recover yourself? The answer is simple and terrifying at the same time. You must become conscious. You must look honestly at where you are, not where you pretend to be, not where you wish you were, but where you really spend your psychological time. Which of these places do you inhabit daily? And then you must begin to leave, not all at once, not dramatically, but deliberately. Start limiting your time in toxic environments. Set boundaries with people who demand your mask. Create space for silence where your inner voice can speak. Make small decisions based on your own truth instead of external expectations. Begin the slow work of integrating what you've hidden in the basement. This won't make you popular. People who are comfortable in these places will feel threatened by your departure. They'll call you selfish for setting boundaries, weird for being authentic, antisocial for needing silence, irresponsible for following your truth. Let them. Your freedom is worth their discomfort. And this is what you'll discover on the other side. When you abandon these dangerous places, you don't just feel better. You become different. Your relationships deepen because they're based on truth instead of performance. Your work becomes meaningful because it comes from your authentic self. Your mind clears because it's no longer filled with noise and comparison. You feel alive again because you've stopped abandoning yourself. But perhaps most importantly, you give others permission to leave too. When you stop participating in these toxic patterns, you create an opening for others to escape. Your family might begin to speak with truth. Your friends might remove their masks. Your workplace might become more human, not because you preach to them, but simply because you show them another path is possible. You see, these dangerous places persist because we collectively agree to inhabit them. But when enough individuals choose freedom, the entire system changes. One person's liberation creates waves that extend far beyond what you can see. So ask yourself right now, which of these places have you called home? Where are you spending your psychological energy? What would it take to leave? Because here's the beautiful truth. You're not trapped. These places have no walls except the ones you believe in. In the hall of mirrors, walk toward a different voice. In the arena of comparison, stop keeping score. In the theater of masks, remove the disguise. In the room of silence, speak your truth. In the storm of noise, turn it off. In the chamber of self-betrayal, choose yourself. In the basement of shadows, descend with curiosity instead of fear. Your true self isn't destroyed. It's simply been buried under layers of accommodation, performance, and fear. But it's still there, patiently waiting for you to remember who you really are beneath all the disguises and compromises. The meaning of your life isn't to successfully navigate these dangerous places. The meaning is to recognize them, abandon them, and discover what remains. When you're no longer defending yourself, performing, or hiding, what remains is you, the real you, the one who was always there, watching, waiting, ready to live again. And when you find that being, you'll wonder how you ever mistook these prisons for homes. You'll see clearly that freedom was always available, always just one honest choice away. The door was never locked. You were simply afraid to open it. But now you know that the 7 dangerous places exist. Yes, but the exit also exists. And the exit begins with seeing where you are, admitting it honestly, and taking one small step toward truth. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect, but now, always now. This is your invitation, not to perfection, not to some distant achievement, but to the simple act of coming home, to yourself, to living from your center instead of from fear, to playing your own music instead of dancing to someone else's rhythm. The dangerous places will always be there, offering their false comforts and familiar prisons. But you don't have to accept the invitation. You can choose differently. You can leave the hall of mirrors and enter genuine conversation. You can abandon the arena and pursue what truly brings you joy. You can remove the mask and risk being seen. You can break the silence and speak your truth. You can turn off the noise and listen to yourself. You can stop betraying yourself and begin honoring your own knowing. You can descend into the basement and integrate your shadows. This isn't easy work, but it's the only work that matters, because what's the point of a life spent in these places? What's the point of surviving if you've lost yourself in the process? Your true self is calling, not for some distant future, but from right here, right now. Beneath all the layers of protection and performance, it's been waiting for you to remember, waiting for you to come home. The question is, will you answer?